violation of the Hatch Act, prohibiting federal employees from engaging in political activity. White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows dismissed the criticism.
Nobody outside of the Beltway really cares.
Melania Trump also broke with tradition, giving her speech last night in the White House Rose Garden, where she addressed the deaths from COVID-19, a topic largely ignored during the convention.
My deepest sympathy goes out to everyone who has lost a loved one.
Following Vice President Pence's headline turn tonight, tomorrow President Trump will give his acceptance speech here at the White House in front of a group of over 1,000 people, and his address will be followed by a fireworks display over the National Mall. Nora?
Be a packed crowd. Paula Reed, thank you. And this programming note will have live coverage of the Republican National Convention beginning tonight at 10 Eastern, 9 Central.
In a historic move tonight, the NBA announces all playoff games tonight will be postponed following this week's police shooting of Jacob Blake, players boycotting in protest.
The Bucks have been in serious discussion about boycotting tonight's game.
The Bucks versus Magic, Houston Rockets versus Oklahoma City Thunder, and LA Lakers versus Portland Trail Blazers games, all to be rescheduled after some of the biggest stars in sports decided enough is enough. LeBron James enraged on Twitter, saying, "We demand change, sick of it." LA Clippers head coach Doc Rivers giving a powerful statement after his team's win last night.
We're the ones getting killed. We're the ones getting shot. It's amazing to me why we keep loving this country, and this country does not love us back.
And you know what? Fans are so eager to watch these playoffs, but the Bucks tweeting tonight that some things are bigger than basketball. Major League Baseball following suit. They're protesting tonight's Cincinnati Reds Milwaukee Brewers game is now going to have to be rescheduled. Other teams expected to follow. David?
All right, Adrian, our thanks to you as well. We're going to turn to the coronavirus in the U.S. tonight. The CDC is under fire for its sudden COVID testing about face amid new guidelines tonight that now say if you've been exposed to the virus, you no longer need a test if you don't have symptoms. Many asking why this change, and ABC News has now learned that Dr. Anthony Fauci did not sign off on this. Here's Steve Osunsami.
Public health experts far and wide can't believe it. The new guidelines, quietly shared on the CDC's website, say that even if you've been in close contact within 6 feet of a person with a COVID-19 infection for at least 15 minutes but do not have symptoms, you do not necessarily need a test unless you are a vulnerable individual or your healthcare provider or public health officials recommend you take one. It's a huge change, and ABC News has learned it happened at a White House task force meeting August 20th without the nation's top infectious disease doctor, who was under anesthesia, away getting surgery. Just last month, the CDC and other health officials were saying something different.
Anyone who thinks they may be infected, independent of symptoms, should get a test.
The New York Times tonight is reporting that the change comes from the top down, from a president who believes the pandemic is being used to hurt his re-election campaign and who is on record saying he'd like to see less testing.
When you do testing to that extent, you're going to find more people, you're going to find more cases. So I said to my people, slow the testing down, please.
His critics are having a field day.
Shame on them. This all is being politicized, and yes, we will be investigating.
He now has CDC carrying forward his political agenda. And it is frightening, and it is alarming.
This reaction online from a public health expert speaks for many. This change in policy will kill. But senior White House officials and the administration's testing coordinator insist tonight that this was driven by science and not politics.
There is no direction from President Trump, the vice president, or the secretary about what we need to do when.
Our source connected to the White House task force says that people in the trenches are horrified by all this. They're concerned that this damages the public's trust in this agency, the CDC, and that it sends the wrong message to Americans about the dangers of being infected with COVID-19, being out and about, and not knowing that you're infected. David.
All right, Steve Osunsami reporting. Thanks. And the third night of the Republican National Convention now getting underway. Tonight's headliner, Vice President Mike Pence, amid questions over the President and First Lady Melania Trump using the White House as a backdrop for multiple speeches and taped segments, using the White House during a political convention. Some Republicans say it's because of COVID. Critics say it's just wrong. Here's John Carl.
The line between the Trump campaign and the Trump White House is blurring beyond recognition as the stage is now set for the president to give his acceptance speech here on the South Lawn. Already, the president has enlisted his Secretary of State to address the convention while on official travel.
I'm speaking to you from beautiful Jerusalem.
And he's used the Marine Honor Guard.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
And his acting Homeland Security Secretary as props, taping a naturalization ceremony for the convention.
Congratulations, you're now citizens of the United States of America.
Signing a pardon for the convention, too. Last night, a quartet of Trump spoke, including the president's son, Eric, and his younger daughter, Tiffany. And the First Lady turned the Rose Garden into her stage. Unlike many of the other speakers, she addressed the pandemic head-on.
The invisible enemy, COVID-19, swept across our beautiful country and impacted all of us. My deepest sympathy goes out to everyone who has lost a loved one, and my prayers are with those who are ill or suffering.
She also spoke about the national reckoning on race.
I have reflected on the racial unrest in our country. It is a harsh reality that we are not proud of parts of our history. I like to call on the citizens of this country to take a moment, pause, and look at things from all perspectives.
Vice President Pence will be speaking from Fort McHenry at the place that inspired the writing of the national anthem. But on this day, when NBA games have been canceled in the wake of the police shooting in Wisconsin, I am told he will not repeat his criticism of athletes who have kneeled to protest racial injustice. David?
All right, John, we appreciate it. I'll see you shortly, and I hope everyone at home will join us. George, Lindsay, and me, the entire political team, coming up later tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern on ABC News Live, 10 p.m. here on the network. When we come back on the news tonight, American forces injured after a tense confrontation with the Russians.
I'm a Verizon engineer.
With great offers on a huge... It's hard for somebody to...
Every day.
Is there a natural litter that actually works?
Right and absolutely necessary. But burning down communities is not protest, it's needless violence. So let's unite and heal, do justice, end the violence, and end systemic racism in this country now.
Carl, it's obviously the violence has been going on in several cities around the country. We've been covering it. It's taken till today for that statement by Joe Biden. Too late, or is that effective messaging there?
Well, better late than never. I mean, the one thing that's been shocking to me is how the Biden campaign has found itself difficult to say what it said today much earlier. In fact, we had one particularly brutal night in Portland, and the next day, Senator Harris on the floor in a committee hearing excoriated a DHS official by claiming that he was somehow or another attacking mothers and veterans when the mob that tried to burn down the federal courthouse in Portland had acted the night before. So this is something that he's got a vulnerability on. The Democrats have a vulnerability, and Biden has to make a decision that he's going to say this consistently when these acts of violence occur and condemn them. We didn't hear him on Chicago. We heard him one time on Portland. We did not hear him on Seattle. We did not hear him on Oakland. This is the kind of thing that is going to fester and is already causing some problems for him, and that's why I think we saw him change his tune tonight.
Meanwhile, Katie, the president is tweeting about the violence, saying we will not stand for looting, arson, violence, lawlessness on American streets. My team just got off the phone with Governor Evers of Wisconsin, who agreed to accept federal assistance. Portland should do the same. He's hitting that line about law and order in the wake of this chaos.
Yeah, so Brett, the big difference here is, of course, Joe Biden is not president, so he doesn't have the authority to send in the National Guard or offer federal assistance, but he condemned the violence today, but those are just words. There was no action to back up what he would do as president if this kind of violence was going on and raging in the streets while he was in the White House. President Trump, from the beginning, has offered federal help. A number of Democratic mayors and governors have refused that help. The Wisconsin governor refused additional National Guard troops yesterday, which resulted in chaos and the breakdown of civil society last night, as we've seen in these horrific videos. And the other contrast that the president can make tonight in the RNC is they have someone whose wife was shot in her garage, and Operation Legend through the Justice Department and the Trump administration has been helping to solve her murder. And so they can bring up these examples of real people who were impacted by not just the riots, but an increase in crime in cities all across the country that has been a major theme. And for Joe Biden to come out now after 3 months of sitting by and really not saying much about this because the polling shows that it's a political problem for him, is pretty nakedly political, and I think people can see right through that.
And obviously it's having impact broadly with the NBA canceling some games tonight, other teams considering it. Britt, I want to just talk, there's so much coverage today about the use of the White House and the trappings of the president. I just want to read, and we talked about it with Mayor Pete and Congressman Walz, from the Office of Special Counsel on the Hatch Act, very quickly. The law expressly does not apply to the president or the vice president. Under long-standing regulations governing the Hatch Act, there are certain areas of the White House where the Hatch Act does not prohibit federal employees from engaging in political activity. The West Lawn, the Rose Garden are two such areas. Therefore, covered federal employees would not necessarily violate Hatch Act merely by attending political events in those areas. My point in reading that is that there's so much to do about it that it's illegal, when in reality the statute's pretty clear.
Yeah, and that's why, Brett, you began to hear people on the Democratic side, on the left, talking about norms being violated. Well, President Trump violating norms is not exactly a banner headline. I mean, this is basically what he promised he would do. He is not Mr. Norm. And so I think, this is an issue that might throw a little shade on these events, but in my view, not very much. It's just much ado about not much.
Yeah, Susan, the White House Chief of Staff said beyond the Beltway, Middle America is not thinking about it.
Well, you talk to voters as we do in our poll. They care a lot about the coronavirus. They care about the economic repercussions, the recession. They care about violence in the streets. They care about racial justice issues like the shooting of Jacob Blake. I've never heard a voter raise this as a concern with me.
Yeah, and Carl, last word quickly. Are Republicans moving the needle here? There was not a bounce for the Democrats after the convention last week. Could there be one this week?
Well, I doubt it, because we live in polarized times. If you look at it, the last four national conventions, pairs of national conventions, have resulted in little bounce for either party. The last time we had a big measurable bounce was 2000. Gore got up by 8 points. His convention was followed by Bush, who got up 8 points, wiped out each other's advantage. I think we're likely to see what we've seen in previous years, which is flat for both parties. Minor bounce, but not really measurable.
We will see. Thank you, panel. When we come back on...
Tell you, we asked Garland if he would make his debut on the beat for a Fallback Friday. He said yes. We have it on tape, and we want to hold him to it. A little something fun to end what is, of course, quite a night. Now, don't go anywhere, because tonight you have coverage of Night 3 of the RNC with all your favorite anchors on MSNBC. And if you stay up late, I will be back tonight at 1 a.m. Eastern, 10 p.m. Pacific. But first, the Readout with Joy Reid starts now.
We've got your back, Road Warriors. Because we...
Fair question. I can't answer that question.
Thank you for asking that question.
Face the Nation Sundays.
Persistence pays off. Jeanette Epps can attest to that. Tonight, NASA says she'll join Boeing's first operational crewed mission next year. Epps will become the first African-American woman on an extended mission to the International Space Station. She holds a PhD in aerospace engineering and has been training since 2009. 2 years ago, Epps was bumped from what would have been her first mission, a flight on a Russian rocket. Well, now, 49, Epps says she's super excited for her first ride in space. I'm excited too. We'll be right back.
2 minutes over on KSFY. Hope to see you over there. Good night now from Courthouse Square.
We're cellular, and these are just
for important healthcare services. In 2008, less than half of all eligible voters between the ages of 18 and 24 voted. Less than half. Young America, why are we only speaking with half our voice when so many issues at stake here directly affect us? before. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. I'm here to ask you to commit to vote. It's never been easier than now. You can go to commit.barackobama.com to register, find your polling location, any other information that you need. It's that easy. You know, earlier this week, Chelsea Clinton reminded us that we are the generation who feel our voices haven't been heard. So vote so that your voice is heard. Over the last 2 days, we've been reminded of something that perhaps we forgot. What has been accomplished and what is at stake. Whether we can get health care, afford college, be guaranteed equal pay, all of these things are at great risk. And that's why I'm here today, to use whatever attention I'm fortunate enough to receive to shed the spotlight on what's at stake for all of us.
Under mandatory evacuations, storm surge expected up to 20 feet. Forecasters warning it's unsurvivable. Our team in the storm zone in Al Roker has the new track. Also deadly chaos during the Jacob Blake protests in Wisconsin. The disturbing video, a gunman on the ground opening fire. 2 people killed, and late today the young suspect under arrest. And the extraordinary moment on live TV, the NBA players angered over the police shooting of Jacob Blake, refusing to take the court. All tonight's games now postponed. Night 3 of the RNC, Mike Pence setting the stage for President Trump's acceptance speech on Thursday and Melania Trump's message on race. The U.S. coronavirus death toll surpassing 180,000 and the sudden reversal from the CDC on testing, why critics say it will cost lives. And the new firestorm for Washington's NFL team, the secret tape cheerleaders say was created without their knowledge, what the team is saying.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening, everyone. Here comes Hurricane Laura, what's being called an extremely dangerous Category 4 storm on track for a bruising overnight landfall along the Texas-Louisiana border. The National Weather Service tonight warning of a catastrophic storm surge, extreme winds, and flash flooding. Officials saying
effort, because it's not just a vote for a president, it's a vote for the values of our country and how our country will proceed for the next 50 years.
In Sioux Falls, Scott Ingen, Dakota News Now.
As you just heard, Governor Nome set to speak at the convention tonight. She is expected to take the stage sometime after 7:30 to give a 5 to 7 minute speech. The focus of that speech will be founding principles, equality, freedom, and opportunity. The speech will take place in Washington, D.C.
Taking a quick look at our forecast with Chief Meteorologist Phil Schreck, a little bit of
they were commingling with the protesters, but when people would ask them, like, who are they, what group are you, what are you out here for, they said, we're not anybody's friend, we're just here to protect the city.
Protests escalating in the aftermath of the shooting of Jacob Blake. All 3 NBA playoff games suddenly postponed tonight, players protesting. Omar Jimenez is out front on the ground, as he has been since the beginning. And Omar, all eyes on exactly where you are right now, that podium behind you. The state's attorney general going to be perhaps giving us some crucial information. There has been just none out there. We may find out more, and I know he's slated to speak any moment.
That's right, Aaron. Now, as we understand, the Attorney General here for Wisconsin, Josh Cole, is getting ready to speak, but we actually just received, literally seconds ago, communication from the Department of Justice for here in Wisconsin, shedding light likely on what he is about to talk about in a few moments. For one, they identified the officer here in the shooting, Kenosha police officer Rustin Shesky, saying he's been a law enforcement officer with the Kenosha Police Department for 7 years. He also mentioned that this call, and this is again coming from the Department of Justice here in Wisconsin that is leading the investigation into this shooting, mentioned that they were dispatched after a female caller reported that her boyfriend was present and was not supposed to be on the premises. And so we can imagine, again, as the Department of Criminal Investigation within this Department of Justice here in in Wisconsin has been leading this. We are going to hear some of those details officially come from the Attorney General, Josh Call. We're going to continue to go through some of this, but there are also various other aspects of this story as well. We, of course, are on the other side of what has been 3 nights of unrest, including last night, seeing, in some cases, instances of deadly violence. And I want to warn, some of the video you're about to see may be considered graphic.
A contentious and at times violent night in Kenosha, Wisconsin for a 3rd night in a row. And in the late night hours, gunshots. Someone appears to go to the ground and then opens fire. Police, speaking publicly for the first time since Jacob Blake was shot, couldn't comment on the police shooting. But they did say a 26 and a 36-year-old were killed last night and a 3rd seriously injured. A 17-year-old suspect, Kyle Rittenhouse, from a nearby Illinois town, was arrested. Police haven't confirmed he's the same person seen in videos from the scene, but he is charged with first-degree homicide. Facebook says it's investigating a group using the name Kenosha Guard, which promoted an event for last night titled Armed Citizens to Protect Our Lives and Property. It's unclear if last night's violence is tied to the Facebook group or event.
Yesterday, I had a person call me and say, why don't you deputize citizens who have guns to come out and patrol the city of Kenosha? And I'm like, oh, hell no. And what happened last night, and I think Chief McSkinnis is going to talk about it, was probably the perfect reason why I wouldn't.
And with more demonstrations expected, Kenosha officials requested an additional 1,500 National Guard. Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers says he's adding to the amount of National Guard he's authorized, making 500 of them available to go along with local law enforcement response already bolstered from other jurisdictions. The governor's office saying they denied the president's offer to send federal
Outages likely into next week and rainfall upwards of 15 inches or more moving into the Mississippi River Valley. Lester?
Al, thanks. Now to another major story. We're following the deadly shooting that erupted during the Jacob Blake protests in Kenosha, Wisconsin. 2 people killed, a 3rd injured, and late today a 17-year-old under arrest. Gabe Gutierrez is there. We want to warn you, some of the video is disturbing.
Tonight, an arrest in the deadly violence that broke out last night in Kenosha, Wisconsin over the shooting of Jacob Blake. This video captured part of the chaos. Shots ringing out, a man on the ground firing a long gun. Bystanders running in horror. It's unclear what happened before or after this video. Right before dawn, authorities are still on the scene. Police say 2 people are dead, at least 1 person injured. Today, authorities arrested 17-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse in Illinois. He faces a first-degree intentional homicide charge.
What it seems to be is a member of a militia group who decided to be a vigilante.
The shootings came after authorities in armored vehicles fired tear gas to disperse crowds. Tensions are high here. Video posted on social media shows men with long guns standing guard outside a boarded-up building. Authorities have not said whether any of them were involved in any confrontations.
Sheriff, do you feel that the presence of militias last night contributed to the increased tension there?
So you want my personal opinion? I don't. To some people it may have been calming. To me it's not.
Since Sunday, when an officer shot Blake multiple times in the back, the Kenosha Police Department has stayed mostly silent. Today, the chief would not answer questions about the Blake shooting or the video, saying it was under investigation by state authorities.
I'm not going to address that because it is one snippet of a very large situation.
Chief, eyewitnesses said that your officers asked Mr. Blake to drop a knife. Was any weapon recovered at the scene?
I can't answer questions about the investigation.
For Blake's uncle, answers can't come soon enough.
We don't want any violence. We don't want destruction. We want justice.
The extradition hearing for the accused gunman from last night is now set for Friday. No comment from his public defender. Wisconsin's governor today authorized another 500 members of the state's National Guard. Lester?
All right, Gabe, a lot of fallout from this, as we can imagine. Pro athletes now taking a stand, with an NBA team refusing to take the court late today. The players protesting racial injustice. Miguel Almaguer has late details.
I don't think we're going to have a Game 5 here.
The protest unfolded on live television, Milwaukee never taking the court against Orlando. Now all 3 playoff games today postponed. For weeks, NBA superstars kneeled for social injustice. Now they're taking a stand after the shooting of Jacob Blake in Wisconsin.
Quite frankly, it's just in our community. I know people get tired of hearing me say it, but we are scared as black people in America.
After the killing of George Floyd, players nearly called off the season so they wouldn't distract from nationwide protests. After play resumed last month, now a pause in the playoffs.
This is going to have repercussions beyond this game.
Clippers coach Doc Rivers, the son of a police officer, led his team through the Donald Sterling saga.
All you do is keep hearing about fear. It's amazing why we keep loving this country, and this country does not love us back.
In a season like no other, players wear a cause on their backs and have a call for change on their minds.
So hard, like just keep watching it. You don't need to be black to be outraged. You need to be American and outraged.
Tonight for the NBA, their strongest statement yet, a message bigger than the game. Miguel Almaguer, NBC News.
It is night 3 of the RNC. Vice President Mike Pence sent to make the case for 4 more years of a Trump presidency after First Lady Melania Trump took center stage last night. Here's Hallie Jackson with that.
After the twilight's last gleaming, Vice President Mike Pence tonight will speak at Fort McHenry, the site that inspired the lyrics to the Star-Spangled Banner. The stage set for a speech heavy on patriotism, according to sources familiar with it, and heavy on policy, with Pence expected to offer what they call a brighter vision and make the case against a Joe Biden presidency. The backdrop last night was closer to home for the president and first lady, not the usual convention arena because of COVID. Instead, his campaign leveraging the White House and the power of his presidency to their political advantage.
I grant John, I'm not sure you know this, a full pardon.
From the emotional pardon of prison reform activist John Ponder.
Today, praise God, I am filled with hope.
To a naturalization ceremony outside the East Room.
Congratulations again to all of you. May God bless you and may God bless our great country, America.
To a speech by Secretary of State Mike Pompeo while on an official trip to Jerusalem.
This president has led bold initiatives in nearly every corner of the world.
The State Department says Pompeo was acting in his personal, not professional capacity, and the White House says no laws have been violated. But critics argue those blurred lines are inappropriate and maybe illegal, and point to what they call a gulf between rhetoric and reality, like the overtures to black Americans, despite the president's past racist tweets, and from a top advisor, a reference to the current coronavirus pandemic in past tense.
Then came a once-in-100-year pandemic. It was awful.
About 1,000 people are still dying every day from the coronavirus, a heartbreak First Lady Melania Trump acknowledged.
Donald will not rest until he has done all he can to take care of everyone impacted by this terrible pandemic.
The First Lady, speaking from the newly renovated Rose Garden, also addressed race years after she defended her husband's birther conspiracy theory.
It is a harsh reality that we are not proud of parts of our history.
And in the tradition of First Lady speeches, Mrs. Trump getting personal about her husband.
Whether you like it or not, you always know what he's thinking. And that is because he's an authentic person who loves this country and its people and wants to continue to make it better.
Before the Vice President takes the stage here, the lineup of speakers for the rest of the night includes top presidential advisor Kellyanne Conway, set to make remarks just days before she leaves the administration to focus on her family. Lester?
Hallie Jackson tonight. Hallie, thanks. We're back in 60 seconds with a sudden change to CDC testing guidelines for COVID, while some states are choosing to defy them.
What you working on?
And a naturalization ceremony of 5 new Americans
On behalf of the United States.
stood in stark contrast to the president's own record on immigration, having dramatically slashed legal migration over his first term. For the second night in a row, the Trump children took to the stage. His youngest daughter, Tiffany, railed against what she called big tech and mainstream media censorship.
This manipulation of what information we receive impedes our freedoms. Rather than allowing Americans the right to form our own beliefs,
while son Eric ended on a rare personal note, nodding to the recent passing of President Trump's brother, Robert.
Dad, let's make Uncle Robert very proud this week. Let's go get another 4 years.
From a newly revamped Rose Garden crowded with unmasked, closely seated supporters, First Lady Melania Trump capped off the night with the only speech to address both the fight for racial justice.
It is a harsh reality that we are not proud of parts of our history. I encourage people to focus on our future while still learning from our past.
And the devastation brought by the pandemic, as the U.S. death toll topped 178,000 people.
My prayers are with those who are ill or suffering. I know many people are anxious and some feel helpless. I want you to know you're not alone.
When we vote, things change.
Meanwhile, today, the Democratic vice presidential nominee, Kamala Harris, worked to bolster the support of black voters at a virtual campaign event in Michigan.
Have a plan to vote and be sure to vote and to talk to all of your family members.
Her Republican ticket counterpart, Vice President Mike Pence, will be among those speaking tonight as his party continues to make its pitch to the American people. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Amna Nawaz.
And now to share her reporting, I'm joined by our White House correspondent, Yamiche Alcindor. So Yamiche, hello. As we just heard, the First Lady did address some of the suffering that's taken place, great suffering among the American people over this virus, but we don't hear that. We haven't heard that from other speakers at the convention. What more are you learning about that?
That's right. The tone of First Lady Melania Trump's speech was vastly different than what we've heard from the RNC over the last week. She started off by expressing sympathy for people who have been infected by the coronavirus or who have died. She said she understood that some Americans felt helpless because of the virus, and she said that you are not alone. That said, there were other speakers, most notably Larry Kudlow, the top White House economic advisor, who talked about the virus as if it was in the past tense, as if it was somehow behind the U.S. and that this is all in the rearview mirror. So I want to put up for people and our viewers numbers that show where we are when it comes to this pandemic. The daily new cases in the United States has decreased in the last month in the United States, but this country is seeing 42,000 new cases per day on average during the last week. Also, the U.S. has the second highest average of new cases after India. And Judy, people in the United States way more people in the United States are dying from the coronavirus than in modernized, industrialized countries. Another thing to note, a recent poll, a CBS poll, found that Democrats and Republicans see the pandemic in vastly different terms. Republicans said that they thought it was acceptable to have about 170,000 Americans die because we are in the midst of a pandemic, but now about 90% of Democrats said that that number was unacceptable. That's just one way that we see this polarized society impacting how people view the coronavirus.
And Yamiche, it's also interesting to look at how the Republicans are talking about the president's record compared to the actual record. I mean, for example, on the issues of immigration, on race, and we know the president even conducted the naturalization ceremony. That was in Amna's report just a moment ago. How does all this square with each other?
Well, First Lady Melania Trump talked about how she, as an immigrant woman, saw the president as wanting to welcome in a lot of immigrants and wanting to tackle issues of racial strife in this country. But when you look at the president's actual immigration policies, they're a lot different. And I should note also, as we were talking about First Lady Melania Trump, she was someone who was perpetuating the racist idea that former President Barack Obama was not born in this country. But to look at the president's own record, in addition to what he said in his rhetoric, let's look at them. When you look at the president's own things that have been happening during the pandemic, he's been detaining immigrant children and families at hotels during the pandemic. Also, 100,000 migrants have been expelled from the U.S. since the virus outbreak. And according to analysis by the National Foundation for American Policy, as a result of President Trump's policies, there will be an estimated 49% reduction in legal immigration by 2021, Judy.
So finally, Yamiche, what else would you say stood out for you about last night, and what should we look for tonight?
Well, what stood out was that you saw a lot of speakers really trying to make an emotional connection between President Trump and everyday Americans. The president was out talking to people. You saw a lot of videos with him interacting with people. But as you noted, and as Amna noted, also the White House was being used in a very central way, in a way that's very untraditional. A lot of people found it to be unethical. And there is the Hatch Act that's supposed to really keep the campaign and the White House separate. But yesterday, we really saw the blurring of the lines. The other thing to note is that we're going to see a number of White House officials speak tonight. There's Vice President Mike Pence, who's going to be giving the keynote address. There's also Kayleigh McEnany, the White House press secretary, and there's going to be Kellyanne Conway. One other thing to note, there were a lot of misleading statements that have been said over the last week, including First Lady Melania Trump. She said that there was an unprecedented number of women serving in the Trump administration. That simply isn't true, Judy. If you look at the numbers, the key executive nominees, the number of women in those positions in the Trump administration is much lower than when President Obama was in office.
Such important reporting. Yamiche Alcindor, thank you, and you're going to be with us tonight, of course, watching it all very closely. Yamiche, thank you.
Thank you.
Ronna McDaniel has played a key role planning this week's convention. She is the chairwoman of the Republican National Committee, and she joins us now from her party's headquarters in Washington, D.C. Ronna McDaniel, thank you very much for being here. So you're now at the halfway point. How do you feel the takeaway is so far? What do you think people are taking away from this convention?
I think people are recognizing that we're telling the story of real Americans in their own words and how the policies of this administration have impacted their lives directly. The farmer, the person who had a business where the PPP loan helped them, a child who benefited from the right to try executive order, the lobsterman from Maine. So that was our hope, is that it would be about the people of America and telling their story.
We noticed the people who calculate TV audiences say the number watching the first night was overall less than it was for the Democratic convention. Last night, you were a lot closer. It was very close. But do you think you're reaching not just the base you want to reach, but are you also reaching persuadable voters, do you think?
I do. I do think we're reaching persuadable voters. I was listening to comments on C-SPAN last night after the programming was done, and there were many voters calling in and saying, I'm switching to Republican. There was one Democrat from Lorain, Ohio, who said, I'm so pleased with what I'm seeing, I'm switching my vote. Those are the things we're hearing. If you count our digital channels, which of course the RNC and the Trump campaign are pushing this out on our digital channels as well, the viewership is incredibly high.
There is a fair amount of commentary out there about what is perceived as a disconnect between some of President Trump's record and what is being said at the convention. I mean, with regard to the pandemic, with regard to the economy, but even with regard to opioid addiction. Just for example, one speaker described a decrease in opioid death in 2018, but we looked at federal data, preliminary data from the CDC, and in 2019, fatalities were up. So how much fact-checking is going on with your speakers?
Well, there's always going to be fact-checking, and you can't deny the fact that the Trump administration has invested heavily, $6 billion into the opioid pandemic. You saw those numbers. The president has tackled this head-on, and we're talking about what the administration is doing every day to fight a crisis. And I think the First Lady made a good point last night, and I appreciate you bringing this up. Let's not talk about gossip as much in our headlines. Let's talk about the opioid crisis. The president has declared it a public health emergency. We have people from all walks of life continuing to pass away and be afflicted by this terrible crisis, yet it isn't given the headlines that it deserves. But we're really pleased, and again, these are stories being told by people in their own words. I don't think you can fact check somebody who's saying this is what happened for me and this is why my life is better because of this policy. That's just the truth.
There's been separately from that, there's been a pretty dark picture painted at the convention of what Vice President Biden would do if he were elected president. He's been called a socialist and worse, somebody who's embraced the Bernie Sanders agenda. We know Joe Biden is clearly to the left of President Trump, but he has not embraced defunding the police. He has not embraced a government-paid Medicare for all, for example. So do you owe your viewers a more realistic description of what Joe Biden stands for?
Well, Joe Biden actually has said he would redirect funds from the police. I consider that defunding. If somebody says, I'm going to take funds away from you and redirect them somewhere else, that means you're not getting the funding. He's picked a running mate, Kamala Harris, who absolutely has embraced Medicare for all and a government takeover of health care. And if you look at the platform of the party, which he combined with Bernie Sanders to create, there's a lot in there that has shown that Joe Biden has lurched very leftward in his party and embraced many of the policies of Bernie Sanders. And you know who said that at the convention? Bernie Sanders. He said, I ran on things that were out of the mainstream 4 years ago that are now part of our party.
I want to ask you very quickly, Ronna McDaniel, about former President George W. Bush. Is he going to appear at the convention? And what about your own uncle, your former Republican nominee for president, Senator Mitt Romney? Are they going to be there? And if not, why not?
Well, it is a different convention, Judy, and I think you recognize that. It's a virtual convention, so it's not the same as crowds in Charlotte like we were hoping to have with the candidates parading across the stage. So we have 2 hours of programming that's covered every night, and the president made a decision. I want this to be about the American people.
But they're also not appearing in videos at the convention, and you've had two iconic Republican leaders pass away since the last convention, former President George H.W. Bush, John McCain. What does it say, I think, about the party, Republican Party of today, that none of these figures is involved?
Well, I don't know if you've looked at the Democrat convention and how many politicians they omitted. I mean, we obviously at the RNC recognize the passing of our former president and our former nominee, but right now this convention is about nominating Donald Trump for president. And with the restrictions that COVID has placed on our convention, I think most Americans recognize that the limited programming we have is going to be focused on why we need to re-elect President Trump.
All right, well, we are going to leave it there. We will be watching tonight and tomorrow night. Republican Party Chair Ronna McDaniel, thank you very much.
Thank you.
People to not attack me. My speech tonight to the RNC, to the country, is much like the First Lady's last night in that she said, hey, if you haven't noticed, I didn't use my precious time here tonight to attack the other side. Boy, we had two former First Ladies last week do exactly that, attack, attack, attack. And I think for all the talk of unifying the country and coming together, there is so much more that unites us than divides us. And some of us are trying and have tried to appeal to those better angels. But I've been very consistent about coming here and doing the job. I didn't change my mind, and I haven't changed my beliefs at all. I have grown tremendously, and I didn't win every debate with the president.
I want to ask you one other thing. He did, I know that. I don't want to press you on the personal things. So much of it has been so public, and I think that, I, as a mom, I believe that your family is off limits, and whatever's out there's out there, but you are a mom and I am a mom, and I don't think that would be right of me as a person. But I do want to ask you, do you think that you should be getting more support from some women out there who might be giving someone in your shoes, making the incredibly difficult decision that you have just made, who's on the other side of the aisle? Do you think that person would be treated differently?
I've gotten a ton of support from people on the other side of the aisle, I have to tell you, and people in the media who otherwise weren't very nice to me or my boss. And they really see this for what it is, which is that we all make our decisions, and we can't have everything all at once. And I also told the president on Sunday night, you are really well positioned for in this White House and at your campaign to win a second term. And I think that's because of all the stuff that he's done while he's been here, the progress report, the vision piece for the future. But also, I have to say, us as mothers aren't term limited. And I've always been there for my kids, but now I can be there more with them. You know what? I only went on one foreign trip, Martha, because I really didn't want to go away for 6 days, 7 days, 8 days at a time, 5 days at a time. and leave the kids here while I did that. So I did put limits. I just didn't run around and say, and I didn't go on the farm. You just make your decisions quietly. But I'm not leaving the arena forever. I will announce my plans in the future. But as I said, and I see it's also a t-shirt now, somebody made it, is selling it on Etsy. It says, less drama, more mama. It only comes in kid sizes, so I think that is, somebody probably took that and said, you know what, kids like that slogan. But you're right. I do want to say, George had sent out a tweet a while ago saying our kids are off limits. We don't give you consent to speak to our minor children for 15, 12, and 10. And most people did lay off, but some didn't. And they should not have done that, Martha, for lots of reasons. And they should respect, for kicks and clicks, you got to think about this. A minor is a minor, and you got to think about that. And you're absolutely right that things are off limits. But thank you. Thanks so much, Martha. I didn't realize you were doing that tonight. Thank you so much. And
thank you very much. We'll be watching tonight.
For what a great mom you are.
in the
Take
future.
care. God bless.
Quick break, and we'll be right back. Stay with us.
So good to see you. You too. So really, how are you? Oh, well, look, that's what we're both taking right now.
Emotional. Right now, the country is emotional. We cannot continue to meet force with force. Let the people be heard. Listen to the people. We don't need all this aggression from either side. Period. We must understand that black and brown folks are emotional people. Always have been. That's why we respect the sports that they play, because they get the job done with internal emotions. But at the same time, we must understand that this eruption in our city is based on years and years and years of oppression. Years of oppression. What you see is a lot of pain, a lot of fear, and a lot of trauma. Both sides are scared of both sides because no one communicates to each other. We go to our subdivisions, we go to work, and we go to our subdivision, and we don't even engage anymore with each other. That has to change. The time is now for change. We need to improve our systems and our environments across the board. Let me repeat that. We need to improve all our systems across the board. Whether it's the school district, whether it's the police structure, I'm not going to even call it a system, I'm going to call it a structure. What is happening now? No one has an idea how to react because there's fear on both sides. Having armed people in our city, that's all right. We understand that. But those people with guns that are militia, that are engaging people, are not looking at them as people. They're looking at these individuals as I need to protect my property. Think about this. The property can be rebuilt. The lives cannot be rebuilt. Once a life is taken or destroyed, it cannot be given back. There's a possibility that this young man would never walk again. Think about that. Imagine your son, your daughter, your relative experiencing trauma every day, pain every day, fear every single day. And this skin that I wear, and I carry myself well, I go through it every day, every single time a car pull up behind me, that's a law enforcement agency. So I would like to bring this front and center. If you lived your life in trauma every day, how would you react? How would you feel? What would you do? The time is now for change. Let the community feel.
Well, we are just listening to Mr. James Hall. He's the president of the Urban League of Racine, Wisconsin. Earlier, we heard from Anthony Davis, who is the president of the Kenosha NAACP. We also heard from Michael Gravely, who is the district attorney of Kenosha, Wisconsin. And of course, the press conference was started by Josh Call, who is the attorney general, the state attorney general. I still have Brittany Packnett Cunningham and Paul Butler. Paul, I want to go to you on this first. What we heard from the district attorney was that the police officer said that Mr. Blake admitted he had a knife, but that the knife was in the driver's side floorboard of the car. So this is something he admitted to police that was in the driver's side floorboard of the car. Can you please explain to me from the point of view of police procedure why it was that a police officer would consider him to be a threat when his back is to the officer, when he is not threatening the officer with a knife, he does not have a knife in his hand, and yet, if we can put the video back up again, this person who, and again, NBC News has not confirmed that this is the shooter, but this is somebody with a gun, is walking down the street, firing at people, and police watch them do it, but they don't consider this guy to be a threat. Can you please explain to me how Mr. Blake, I know that they got in there, they said, well, he said he had a knife. It's in the floorboard of the car, according to the officers. His back is to the officers. 7 bullets were emptied into him, per the attorney general. This guy is walking up and down the street, packing and shooting, and the police watch him. Can you explain that?
No, Joy, I can't. We heard the district attorney scold the protesters and say they need to be calm and deliberate about the most important decisions in life. Well, that's the opposite of how Officer Chesky treated Mr. Blake. We don't have any evidence that the officer knew about any alleged knife. I'd also be really interested in the circumstances of an interrogation of a person who's been shot 7 times and been in surgery since that incident. We didn't hear that there was a reasonable fear of officer safety or civilian safety, which is the standard for when the police are allowed to use deadly force. We did hear that no other officers at the scene fired a shot. That raises a red flag. We heard a little bit about Mr. Blake's experience with law enforcement and an alleged stay-away order. What we didn't hear was whether Officer Chesky has a disciplinary record, whether there have been citizen complaints about him. The good news is there is an independent investigation, so the prosecutor who works with these officers every day won't be the person who's investigating the crime. And Joy, finally, I always in these situations want people to remember a man named Richard Louis Deere. He was the Planned Parenthood bomber. He killed 3 people. He wounded 9 others, including several police officers. There was an hours-long standoff with him where he was shooting. The police took him alive. He was white.
Yeah, they also took the Charlotte's, the person who killed the people inside of Mother Emanuel. They not only did they take him alive, they fed him Burger King and made sure that his tummy wasn't empty. I want to go to you, Brittany. The other thing that we heard in this press conference about the protesters, and this is what Michael Gravely, who is the DA in Kenosha, said, is that many of the people who are coming in and protesting, and I'm not sure if he meant the people who are perpetrating violence, such as this 17-year-old who's been arrested for shooting 2 people, or just the protesters in general, he said, are not from Kenosha or not from Wisconsin. Is it relevant where protesters come from? When a person is killed, there seems to be this sort of rote that, well, only the local people should be out here. Is it relevant? And do you understand why we had to hear that protesters were not from Wisconsin? Do you find that relevant?
Well, you know, this kind of narrative about outside agitators is not new to movements. Dr. King was called an outside agitator. John Lewis was called an outside agitator. These were folks who recognized that a threat to justice anywhere, injustice everywhere, rather, is a threat to justice everywhere. So outside agitators being the line, being the script is something that we are used to. But if people really want to see what we saw happen in Kenosha stop, we have to actually make sure that people like Jacob Blake are not shot after they are reportedly breaking up a fight by police. So we actually have to make sure that we are dealing with the roots of the problem here. The way to end protests is not to demean protesters. The way to end protests is actually to deal with the roots of the injustice that protesters are out there protesting. We're going to keep having the same conversation until we deal with the root issues. And I'm happy to remain a broken record about that, because if you want the protest to end, then stop killing us.
I will note that 656 people per the Washington Post have been shot by police thus far this year, 123 of them black. I will note that that is a higher percentage of black people killed by police than are in the United States population. We'll just let you all marinate on that while I thank Brittany Packnick.
So you've got that.
Summer is here and back.
And Shaq out there, the WNBA now announcing moments ago they're not going to play the games they'd scheduled tonight in support of the NBA boycott. I mean, as you sit here, Bob, you've been covering the sports world for your entire career. Have you ever seen anything like this?
No, not exactly. Obviously, players have walked out or refused to play. They were on strike over labor issues. Tommy Smith and John Carlos have been referenced several times over the last several hours on CNN, 1968 Mexico City Olympics with the clenched fist salute. Muhammad Ali, not in a team sport. We know about what he did and what he sacrificed. Colin Kaepernick and others kneeling. But as far as not playing in a team sport over a social issue, I have not seen this, and I've been following this for a very, very long time. And now it's coming from all directions. The NBA, which generally speaking has been for many years the most progressive, and I mean that in the best sense of the term, the most progressive of all the leagues, and generally speaking has the most cooperative, respectful, and trusting relationship from the commissioner's office to its players of any of the four major team sports. The NBA is in full support of this. They're not just coping with it, they're showing that they're in support and understanding. Meanwhile, in baseball, which has fewer African American players than either the NFL or the NBA, the Milwaukee Brewers, in effect in solidarity with the Milwaukee Bucks, since they would be the baseball team of Kenosha, Wisconsin, as the Bucks are the NBA team, they postponed their game tonight against the Cincinnati Reds. The WNBA had 4 games, I think, scheduled for tonight in their playoffs. They're doing a very interesting thing. At the 7-minute mark of each quarter, whoever has the ball is going to put the ball on the floor and take a 24-second violation. And the other team will then do the same so that there's no competitive advantage. The 7-minute mark, because of the 7, which is generally what we think, it might be 8, but the 7 bullets that wound up in Mr. Blake's back.
I mean, it is incredible when you see this solidarity. You know, the head coach of the LA Clippers out in California where you are, Doc Rivers, had an emotional press conference. And there was just a moment that I thought was really powerful as he tried to, you know, take away all the politicization and simplification of the words defund the police and talk about what he meant and how he felt. Let me just play it.
We protest and they send riot guards, right? They send people in riot outfits. They go to Michigan with guns and they're spitting on cops and nothing happens. My dad was a cop. I believe in good cops. We're not trying to defund the police and take all their money away. We're trying to get them to protect us, just like they protect everybody else.
It was really a powerful and eloquent moment there from Mr. Rivers. Do you think this resonates, Bob, with sports fans?
Yes, I do, and I think that some sports fans will resent it, and some of that resentment is on display in various ways, subtle and overt, this week, coming from other directions at the RNC. Some will resent it. Some will say, I'm not going to watch anymore. I've had it up to here. They said it with Colin Kaepernick. They've said it with Black Lives Matter on the court in the NBA bubble. So this will perhaps kick that resentment up a notch for some. But I think, and I think Doc Rivers understands this, this is a seminal moment for a lot of reasons. Think of how diverse the protesters were in the aftermath of George Floyd's death. Think of the response now. The Milwaukee Brewers, most of the players on that team are not players of color. And the players of color with the Detroit Lions, or now with the Milwaukee Bucks and others in the NBA, are joined by their white fellow teammates. There's something afoot here that is different than what has preceded it. And while I certainly understand Doc Rivers' emotions, he is a universally respected man. He's a good man. And as he said, someone's speaking to me, and it's not you, Aaron, I guess. I'm sorry. Should I continue? I guess I should.
Finish your thought, please.
Doc Rivers is a universally respected man, but I think he understands that regardless of some of the forces of resentment and resistance, or worse, including what we saw in Kenosha over the past 24 hours with the shootings, there are millions upon millions of non-black people in the United States who stand with him and with his black brothers and sisters.
Bob, thank you very much. You know, and on Bob's words, I want to go to Ben Jealous, who's president of People for the American Way Foundation, former president and CEO of the NAACP.
Is right there. Yeah, definitely.
I'm up and I'm never going to bed.
Or visit Get
to police departments that they need, but we're also going to hold police departments accountable. And as it relates to qualified immunity, because I want to answer your question.
Right. Okay, good. I was going to get you there. I was going to walk you right on to it, but you came right to it.
I wasn't going to skip out on you.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, I'm like, she wants the qualified immunity answer.
I do.
There's been a lot of misinformation, disinformation out there. Let me be very clear. Vice President Biden believes that qualified immunity needs to be significantly reined in. He believes that abuses of power should not currently be covered by qualified immunity. And take chokeholds, for example. Okay? That is an abuse of power. And that is not something that should be covered. Now, we know that there's currently a bill by Hakeem Jeffries in the United States Congress that would ban chokeholds. That is a bill that Vice President Biden supports. But yes, we need to do something about qualified immunity as it currently stands. It is way too expensive.
Simone Sanders, I appreciate you answering that question. Please go back and let your...
Always good to look back. Did you spot Karl Rove in the Dan Quayle video? I did. That's the story on Wednesday, August 26th, but we're going to be back tonight at 10 o'clock for our live coverage of the Republican National Convention. Join me and Brett. We will see you then. Have a great night, everybody.
Country's founders were careful to not give too much power to the federal government.
Our party respects individuals based on who they are. We don't divide people based on their beliefs or their roots. We don't shun people who think for themselves. We respect everyone equally under the Constitution.
Governor Noem concluded her speech saying President Trump is fighting for you.
Most students start school fresh off summer vacation. In Alyssa Bosman's case, she was barely out of the ICU. To say the 21-year-old University of South Dakota student was determined to start her senior year on time is an understatement. Kevo Land's Brady Mallory takes you to Vermilion to show you her strength and determination.
With all these steps, it'd be easy just to take an elevator. But Alyssa Bosman is ready for the climb.
I'm just so grateful that I can be here, walk up the stairs, and go to class.
This is Bosman's first time on USD's campus after an abrupt end last semester. Between her enthusiasm to be back, tackling her schoolwork, and saying hi to friends, you wouldn't even notice unless you saw her scar.
It's kind of scabby.
She had brain surgery.
So yeah, it's kind of gross.
2 weeks ago.
I didn't even have time to be scared.
Months of headaches got worse. Earlier this month, the searing pain came every single day.
They wouldn't go away until I threw up. And then I'd throw up and it would hurt so bad. I would have to like squeeze my neck and hold my head and I would just like cry because the pain was so bad.
At one point, It was hard to even get out of a car.
I couldn't walk. And I was like, Jackie, like, that's my sister. I was like, can you come hold me for a second? And she literally just, like, had to hold me up.
Bosman found out she had a brain tumor on a Monday. On Tuesday, surgeons removed it. Thankfully, it wasn't cancer. By that Wednesday, she had just 1 week to get out of the ICU so she could start her senior year of college on time. Brain surgery didn't make Bosman any less stubborn or hard-headed.
My mom didn't exactly want me to come back right away, but she knew I wasn't gonna not, so she just dealt with it.
With any hurdle, it's always easy to just give up. Whether it's college, brain surgery, or just tough times, Bosman hopes her stories will help others face their hill and just keep going.
I've actually got a lot of positive responses like that, which makes me feel really good because it like was so abrupt and sudden for me. I didn't have time to be sad, like especially with all the love that I got from all my family and friends.
In Vermilion, Brady Mallory, KELO News.
Bosman says other than some light sensitivity, she's feeling good after her surgery. She is so grateful for a good outcome that she went to church right after she got out of the ICU.
We'll stay quiet through the rest of the night, but round 2 is on the way Thursday evening into Friday morning. We'll talk about that, plus the cool down that takes us into the end of August.
Who supports both law enforcement and Black communities. And if you let Joe Biden get elected, I mean, this was the line from Pence that stuck out to me, which is the choice in this election is whether America remains America. And that means that Biden would destroy America and change it in a way that would be unrecognizable to you suburban voters that we are trying to attract, to you women that we are trying to attract. So that's what tonight was.
David, from Lou Holtz, who says that the president is a truth teller, and when a leader tells you something, you have to be able to trust it. I don't know. That's a very arguable point, obviously, with this president. And also, by the way, Lou Holtz saying of the people who are protesting in the streets, quote, they don't have pride in themselves. An interesting view of a man who says love is one of his guiding principles.
Yeah. Well, look, this whole exercise is the reality show convention. They are trying to create an alternative reality. The very little mention of the virus that has gripped this country, very little mention of, you listen to the discussion of the economy and you wouldn't know that we have 10.2% unemployment right now. This is Donald Trump. His belief is that if you can sell anything, if you do it right, and this is his production. But the question is, by the way, on the issue of race, no acknowledgement by Mike Pence or anyone about the issue that has actually galvanized millions of Americans of all races, and that is that if you're Black in America, you're 3 times more likely to be shot by police than if you're white. That is what people are outraged about. But this is, let's think back to the midterm elections of 2018. You remember the caravans. The caravans are coming. They're threatening our way of life.
Yeah, but that was 2 years ago. That's no longer worthwhile as a thing.
Understand, but the tactics.
So now,
but Anderson,
yes.
The tactic is still good. Scare the hell out of people. Right. And this is the tactic that Trump is employing here. So I appreciate they made an effort to try and remake him tonight. I think that's to try and make Republicans who are uncomfortable with him feel more comfortable with him. But the through line of this convention has been this law and order message, and that he's the president that you have to vote for, or else you're going to submit yourself to chaos. I think it's the point that you guys made earlier, that Abby made, is the one they're going to have to deal with, which is he is the president, and in many ways he's seen as contributing to the chaos and the antagonism. And that is something he'll have to overcome if he's going to get to where he wants to go.
And 2 nights ago, I guess it was, we had the McCloskeys on, who have been charged with a felony, but who were there being, clearly because they are, the president believes they are perfect for this message. That was 2 nights ago. Tonight, we have a 17-year-old American who is now in custody, went out, apparently, details aren't yet fully known on this, but there were certainly a number of citizens who went out, encouraged each other to come out armed in order to protect property. And what we know is that a 17-year-old is in custody for shooting 2 other people who seem to have been protesters. I mean, it is, you know, it's, I don't know if you can draw a through line between those nights, but it's certainly something that this administration is not at least even recognizing tonight.
Yeah, I think you can draw a through line. Think about what that couple did. They drew guns on people who were outside their home on a sidewalk because they were black. I mean, that's exactly what happened in that instance. And that is the message, I think, that Donald Trump wants to deliver to particularly white people, that he is the one standing between the lawlessness of black and brown people. He is the one that can essentially help white Americans maintain their status. He gets black people to sort of vouch for him and say that he's not a racist, and in fact say that America's not even really a racist country. So listen, this could very well work, because I think, you know, there is some anxiety among white Americans about the changing demographics of this country. There is some anxiety about sharing power with different groups in this country, and you have Donald Trump saying that to white America, you won't have to share that power in his America. So I think, listen, he has been able to reinvent himself to white audiences throughout his career, particularly white evangelicals who see him in some ways as a messianic kind of figure. So I think there are white Americans who very much want to believe in Donald Trump, so they could very well believe in this version of Donald Trump that was presented here that is patently false and patently at odds with the Donald Trump we know and have seen over these last many years.
And Nia, it doesn't even seem like it's really, I mean, yes, they would like to obviously get as many black voters as possible, but it seems really a lot of the speakers tonight and throughout we've seen is to give permission to more moderate white voters who might be willing to vote for Donald Trump, but unsure and uncomfortable. It gives them permission.
It takes the issue of gender-based violence as an emergency. However, GBV in this country is really a war against women. Millions, thousands of women wake up every day as if they were soldiers. We never know how many of us will be beaten, how many will be raped, how many will be killed. As we're talking right now, in the few minutes, our statistics demonstrate that at least 3 women have already been raped while we were having this conversation. Now, we have to congratulate the government for all the legislation it's putting in place, but the issue with gender-based violence goes along the way of having the legislation, but ensuring that such legislation is actually applied. So there is effort in the country at this point to ensure that at the level of the judiciaries, at the level of the police, they are trained people to handle this issue. However, the numbers are horrendous. It's every day, it's families, it's women that are getting ripped apart. And of course, nothing that is done still justifies. And we also have a very low level of prosecution when it comes to abusers of to abusers. And so it does not really respond, or it does not make sense to ask for women to step out, to come and talk about the experience if then the perpetrators are not punished and made accountable.
Well, also, you believe that men should speak out too, and one of the major male figures in South Africa, the captain of the Springbok national rugby team, has spoken up. He says he's done so because he witnessed his mother and his aunt being abused when he was a child. This is what he said recently. I will read it for you. I remember when I was younger, the first thing I was taught was how to use a condom, not how to treat a lady or how to be a better man. I mean, it's a pretty big admission, a pretty sensitive thing to say.
And it is a reality of many men in this continent. Men are not taught how to treat women with respect and to value them. As a result, we see the horrible numbers that show every day in terms of rape, in terms of abuse, and disregard. Above that is the disregard for women's lives. And then, of course, it's from the lower level, it's from the family level that goes to the societal level, to institutions that then manifest the kind of sentences that we as African women are now fighting again and demanding that there is justice for each one of us that goes and reports gender-based violence.
And Joshina, I'm sure for your global community of women as well, because you know it's happening here in the UK, Brazil, France, Mexico, the US have seen spikes, and according to the UN, literally hundreds of millions of girls and women last year alone were attacked by their partners. Joshina Michelle, thank you so much indeed for joining us. And now, back to the big story of the week, which is the Republican convention and the case for President Trump and 4 more years. Mia Love broke a glass ceiling in 2015 when she...
Miller, a former South Dakota First Lady and the chair of the Women's Vote delegation, known as Her Vote, Her Voice. For the past week, we have been celebrating the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage. Tonight, we'll take part in a virtual Cheers to 100 Years toast and join with other states in lighting up our buildings and monuments in the colors of the suffrage movement. But before we get to that, here are a few words from Governor Kristi Noem.
Hi, I'm Governor Kristi Noem. South Dakotans have grit, a toughness that's passed on through the generations. The women who came before us had grit. They fought during a pandemic, a war, and civil unrest to win the right to vote, to give us a voice. Without their efforts, it would not have been possible for me to become South Dakota's first female governor. We've come a long ways in 100 years, but we're still fighting to preserve the stories of how women impacted our state. We need to preserve our history so that our young girls and women can learn that suffrage wasn't just a movement to win a vote. It was an invitation to follow your dreams, and it gave us the freedom to accomplish them. Earning this privilege took sacrifice, determination, and grit. Because of the suffragettes, we have the right to participate in the great experiment of American government. Because of their passion, we are free to follow ours. We should honor these women and their tremendous work. And that's why I appointed a delegation of women called the Women's Vote Centennial Delegation. And out of that has come the Her Vote, Her Voice initiative. I encourage you to support these efforts by learning more, by donating online, or uncovering a story or artifact of how women changed our state. Our fight may be different, but our history is the same. Let's work to preserve this history for the next generation, for our daughters and our granddaughters, to help them find their voice. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tracy Satoff, co-chair of the Her Vote, Her Voice delegation. Did you know that South Dakota was one of the very first states to give women the right to vote, even before the nation voted on it as a whole? We're blessed to live in a state with rich history, where women's contributions have changed the face of our state for a long time. But those stories are vastly underrepresented in the historical archives and in the stories that people talk about of South Dakota. We're at risk of losing that history, and it's slipping through the cracks. Her Vote, Her Voice volunteers are on a mission to change that. For the last year, we've had over 200 women working together to commemorate, celebrate, preserve, and share stories of women and their impact on South Dakota. But we need your help. Continue to give and donate so that we can have the funding and resources to share the stories and share with generations to come how women have changed the legacy of South Dakota and created a new future for all of us. Learn more at our website at hervotehervoice.org. On this centennial anniversary, we're joining cities, states, and the entire nation as we gather together to celebrate the suffrage centennial. We'll be lighting up monuments in purple and gold, famous icons, state parks, and other destinations around the state. United, we come together to share in a statewide toast and cheers to 100 years and celebrate the legacy of the suffragists who started it all and the future generations to come for the next 100. Let's all raise our glasses as we cheers to a remarkable 100 years. Please enjoy our Forward into Light celebration.
And you're taking a live look now at several South Dakota landmarks lit up in the colors of the suffrage movement, purple and gold. Along with Falls Park, Susan B. Anthony School and the Arc of Dreams in Sioux Falls, the Corn Palace in Mitchell, Main Street Square in Rapid City.
Hundreds of institutions nationwide are also participating in this once-in-a-lifetime moment. The nationwide Forward into Light campaign is named in honor of the historic suffrage slogan, "Forward through the darkness, forward into light."
The West Lyon Wildcats have never had a losing season under their head coach. Can you believe it? Mark Ovenden tells us about that next in Dakota News Now Sports.
At Schulte Subaru, kindness isn't just a word. It's a way of doing business.
People want to come here. Along with the state, it's very disappointing. Yeah.
And profoundly white supremacy at its core, profoundly male supremacy at its core.
Sister all right, panel, great to see all of you. And former acting director of national intelligence, Rick Grinnell, gave an amazing speech tonight. He's here next. Plus, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy. What's Nancy Pelosi thinking tonight? Eating her ice cream, we know, but what else is she thinking? He's going to give us his thoughts. Night 3 of the RNC has wrapped, but we have an amazing event for you tomorrow evening. We'll tell you all about it. Don't go away.
Could unite this country around a series of crises that, whether it's the wildfires or the hurricane or the pandemic or the racial strife that is breaking out in our streets, there's nobody home. There is nobody home to help. And it is a sad, sad state of affairs that this president finds himself at a moment when we need leadership, and he's just incapable of being that president. As Michelle Obama said last week, he just is not up to the job.
Lawrence, Claire last night at this hour on live television basically challenged reporters to do their jobs and look into the backstory of the naturalization ceremony we saw as part of the telecast of the convention. To call those new citizens a highly curated bunch would be an understatement. Sure enough, the Tarini Party and Mike Bender over at the Wall Street Journal report that 2 of the women did not know they would be appearing in an event with a political target, and they had not given their consent.
Yeah, and they were given the oath by a person who does not actually occupy the job that he claims to have, that Donald Trump claims to have. The so-called acting Secretary of Homeland Security has been determined to be fraudulently positioned there and may have absolutely no legal authority to have admitted that oath. They would do well to get themselves to a federal judge, which is where these are normally done, and maybe get that oath taken again, just to be sure. But it was obvious disgraceful use of government facilities, first of all, and then the disgraceful use of government personnel on the job in a convention setting. And let's remember the lie told last night by the White House personnel about why this president had to be at the White House. They said, we don't want to move him, because it's so difficult in the age of COVID to move him around to different places. It takes a lot of people. Of course, he's gone and done these rallies. And then who walks out there tonight? Who walks out there at Fort McHenry tonight at the end of it all? Donald Trump, the person who they said they didn't want to move around last night, so we have to keep him at the White House because it's easier. So everything they're saying about the way they're violating these laws is a lie. They violated the laws last night. They violated the laws again tonight. Kellyanne Conway, who has violated the Hatch Act more than anyone in history went out there and violated the Hatch Act again tonight on television, preceded by the White House press secretary who went out there and told lies about what Donald Trump has done to healthcare in America, when all he has done is try relentlessly to take it away from people, and especially people with pre-existing conditions. She just went out there to lie about that while violating the Hatch Act on television. As long as they continue to go out there and literally violate the law by appearing at this thing, we shouldn't be letting it go without comment. It was Claire's turn last night, and I'm sorry, but I had to use my time for it tonight.
Michael Steele, let's talk about activism in sports. Happens to be the very day anniversary of Kaepernick taking a knee. You and I are old enough to remember Cassius Clay before he became Muhammad Ali. You and I are old enough to remember the Mexico City Olympics. Mike Tirico on this network earlier tonight said today was the biggest act of its kind in the world of sports. My question to you is today the start of something altogether new?
That's a good question, and I think that's one of those to be determined answers, because we're not really sure. We want to get some feedback maybe tomorrow from the players meeting, the NBA players meetings tonight. When they canceled the games, all the players in the bubble decided to have a conversation, and my hope as part of that conversation, that if they decided that they were going to not play out the rest of the playoffs, fine, but then stay in the bubble, and keep your platform, because America, believe it or not, is listening. They're paying attention, and use that platform for that. If you decide to go on with the games, okay, manage that. But I think, Brian, we're going to wait and see. This was that moment, Mexico City. It was the fist raised in the air. It was Muhammad Ali declaring, "I'm not a slave. Don't use my slave name." This was a defining step, and we hope that the other sports franchises and owners and players around the United States take note of this moment and decide over the next few weeks themselves, because I think it can pay some real big dividends. I really do. It's one of those moments. If you listen to Doc Rivers, and the plea in his voice, and the pain in his voice, and when he said, when he looked at us and he said, why, we love America. Why can't America love us back? You just, man, that stops you. That stops you in that moment. So I hope all sports figures take a note of this.
Doc Rivers, especially as the son of a police officer, but you're right. Everything we have mentioned, from Kaepernick to Ali to the two American sprinters with raised fists on the podium, it all changed that part of their world and the world of sports and society. To Claire McCaskill, to Lawrence O'Donnell, to Michael Steele, thank you on a busy Wednesday night for hanging out with us and taking our questions. Coming up, we continue to cover all of these major stories.
And there's only one country in the entire world that gets in trouble when they focus on themselves, and that is the United States. So I tried to make the case tonight to say America first just simply means that we think about Americans' security first, and that's prosperity, national security, all of the things that make us a great country. We will no longer be a great country if we have to have a worldwide consensus of a policy, which means lowest common denominator.
Well, isn't it the case that if Biden is president, Europe gets whatever Europe wants for the most part, China gets whatever China wants for the most part, and then you have a bunch of never-Trumpers still worried about Russia, like that's the biggest threat to humanity, when China has, the largest standing army in the world. I mean, that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, it's exactly the case. I mean, look no further than during the Obama-Biden administration, they had a policy that the Europeans should pay more at NATO, but they never made it an issue. They certainly never told the Germans that you had to make this an issue. Donald Trump has given NATO $41 billion in new money just simply by telling the Europeans and NATO members you have to pay more. This is something that they've been saying to us, yeah, we hear you, but we really don't want to do it. So a Joe Biden administration, you're going to have the Europeans and others at the UN vetoing the U.S. policy if they don't like something.
I want to play what General Keith Kellogg said tonight that raised some eyebrows.
Over the past 3.5 years, I have witnessed every major foreign policy and national security decision by the president. I have been in the room where it happened. I saw only one agenda and one guiding question when tough calls had to be made. Is this decision right for America?
Well, the room where it happened isn't just from lyrics from Hamilton. It's the title of John Bolton's book. Was that a swipe at Bolton?
No, I don't think so. I think what the general was trying to say is he's there and he knows that President Trump is totally focused on the American people. And, you know, I've seen it over and over when, you know, big wealthy people come in and they complain about energy prices, gas prices. I've seen President Trump say, you know, I think that it's cheaper gas for the American people. I mean, he really does think about these issues in terms of what is good for everyday Americans. And I love it. I love watching him negotiate.
I know. I've never seen a president, and I've had a chance to meet a lot of many presidents, talk about how much stuff costs. You know how much it costs to have the troops there? You know how much this costs? I mean, he actually cares about how much we're spending on stuff that might not be delivering the returns for the American people that we need. And I'm so glad you brought that up. Fantastic speech tonight. Ambassador Grinnell, thank you so much. And speaking of powerful speeches, my next guest will be addressing the RNC tomorrow night and will lay out what's at stake if Democrats are allowed to take full control of Congress. Joining me now is House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy. Congressman, what could Nancy Pelosi possibly be thinking after watching this series of testimonials about our love for this country and the respect for how the president has put Americans' interests first in every decision?
I think she has two fears. She wonders why she wasted the majority, and now she's wondering why she wasted the Democrat convention. You know, you looked at ours, it was hope versus despair, helping versus defunding. And we're talking about cures instead of shutting this country down again. No greater contrast than their 4 days than what these 4 days are going to be.
Well, we have Marine One landing behind us. You know that all too well, so I'll shout over that for a bit. The president coming back from Fort McHenry after an incredible night. Congressman McCarthy, I think a lot of folks, and we talked about this earlier, women especially, I would say, tone and emotion, it matters to everybody, but women, it matters, like how you come across to people. What do you say tonight to the people watching about what you've seen from the president behind closed doors repeatedly in your interactions with him? You know, the toughness, yes, but what else?
You know, I've watched places that people have not seen. I watched where we were flying one day. He said, I'm cutting this rally short because we're going to Dover because 2 Americans were killed. And when we went out to Dover, I watched this man stand in the rain with no umbrella, nothing. And when he sat and talked to the families, the empathy that he showed, the caringness that he showed. And I watched him, we got back on Air Force One. That's all he talked about, of the life that was lost and why was it lost. I've watched him when there was shooting victims and a family in the back. These are things that nobody sees, and I hope tonight, or through this convention, you watch the empowerment, the empathy that he's given. I've found this to be the most diverse Republican convention we've ever been a part of. And it wasn't a Hollywood star, it was real American stars. And that's really about President Trump. He is the one who's listening to a voice no one would hear before. And he is the one that is putting them first instead of Hollywood. And I think that is something that I want America to see.
There was a moment on another network tonight where they were trying to kind of dismiss the Republicans' concerns or the way they discussed the riots. Watch.
The caricature of your city and other, as the Republicans say, Democrat-run cities, is that the whole country is at risk of falling into anarchy and chaos. Does it have a material effect on your ability to govern?
It did have an impact on the summer on some things because the president and Fox News were so insistent on driving that message that people started to come there to make the reality real.
Of course, another blue state mayor blaming now President Trump for, I guess, heightening the violence in the Pacific Northwest. Congressman.
To speak up. Every single night in Portland this has been going on. Seattle, Chicago. But you know the other difference? This president engaged for Wisconsin and was going to send more troops. It was the governor who did not take the full number that he needed of why we have more problems in Wisconsin. This is what the real discussion is about. And you were right when you spoke earlier about the powerful words of the vice president. This is not a battle of Republican versus Democrat. This is really coming down to socialism versus freedom. We have Barack Obama who's saying there is no difference between Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is not a Democrat. He's a registered socialist. And that is what we're competing against today, and that is why I believe we need to move forward, not backwards.
Congressman, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it. And we're also tracking...
They can be over 100 miles an hour. Gusts can be up to 150 miles an hour. The projected storm surge is being called by the National Hurricane Center as potentially unsurvivable. Entire towns could be underwater. Again, we are expecting it to make landfall somewhere in the next 2 hours or so. You know, it's never exact. It will be on our watch. CNN is out in the storm zone tonight. We'll bring you everything we can see.
We've got some breaking news, too, on that unrest that I mentioned just a moment ago in Kenosha. The wake of police shooting, the police shooting of Jacob Blake. We have been, and others have been reporting on the social media profiles, okay, Chris, believed to belong to this suspect in last night's shooting in the streets that left 2 people dead, 1 wounded. A white 17-year-old. That's who they believe is responsible, Kyle Rittenhouse. It shows that these posts show a teenager with an affinity for guns, who is pro-police, and is also a supporter of President Donald Trump. He attended a Trump rally at Drake University in Des Moines, Iowa. That was on January 30th. Posted a short video from the front row of his social media. And then there is another social media video. It is believed to be from his account, and it places him at the scene of those protests last night. We have a lot to talk about when it comes to this story, Chris. The way it's being portrayed in many ways, it's not accurate, not exactly what it is. Wasn't a lot of talk about this Rittenhouse guy at the convention tonight.
Well, no, and the irony is that Vice President Mike Pence called out Joe Biden, saying, you know, he didn't mention the violence in these cities, but we're about law and order. He didn't mention these shootings. Why? Is it because it's a white guy? Because it was militiamen? Pro-police is not what he was about, because if you're pro-police and you respect the law, you don't do that when you have a weapon that you shouldn't have if you're 17 years old.
And you let legitimate police officers handle the situation.
Now, those details, if the reporting is accurate, and police encountered this guy and other guys similarly situated and did nothing to them, saw them as allies, that is a tremendous problem. And Mike Pence ignoring it, because they're going to have a much better chance of knowing about these details faster than we will. You know, these local police there, they're being very quiet. They're not going to be quiet with the federal government. And the silence will be deafening if that is the case, especially for Mike Pence, Captain Ernest. This will be a huge deal, and I'll tell you what it will do. The Republican convention wants to show you pictures of riots and say, that is the problem. We are about law and order. We will not allow this. They are pointing to the symptom of a problem that they refuse to address. Mike Pence said tonight, Joe Biden says that this country is systemic with its racism. It is. That doesn't mean we're all racists. It means we have institutions that we must force to address. Yeah. That's what it means. And if you're going to ignore a kid like this and others similarly situated shooting people in a crowd, and you're going to have state TV have their people celebrate them, and say, is it any surprise that these guys had to do this when nobody else will keep order? How's that pro-police?
Wait, I heard that. And I was flummoxed. Wait, a 17-year-old who shouldn't have a gun had no other choice but to go out and defend himself? First of all, he didn't even live there.
Different state.
Different state. So how is he defending his a community that he doesn't live in?
And how can you be law and order and then say, at least implicitly, that this is okay? You're law and order. You want law and order. Don't riot. Don't break the law. Oh, but
you're breaking the law.
You can't take a long arm and go shoot people that you don't agree with. That's okay.
That you shouldn't have legally. You shouldn't legally have it at 17 years old. Am I wrong about that?
You know, so it's just, look, the hypocrisy is going to be obvious, but more importantly, this is on Trump's watch, and the role of a president, right, left, is to be reasonable and to bring people together. Ignoring this kind of violence will foment it.
Yeah.
And we all know that. And we saw tonight, the right kind of measured response, ironically, is by the people that keep getting attacked by the right, the athletes. They refuse to play as a protest to what happened to Mr. Blake.
That's what I was looking at my notes to make sure that because we have so much of the Milwaukee Bucks.
Yeah.
Postponing a playoff game, saying, you know what? And if you're in Kenosha, that's your team. They're saying this shooting of Jacob Blake is more important than a playoff game.
That's right.
And even, and all the teams, and even the owners and the coaches saying there are some things more important than basketball. Did you ever think that you'd hear that from?
Right. And the criticism is, you know, as also we heard from state TV, just shut up and dribble, play the game. But I think the time has come that we have to realize you don't ignore problems and expect them to go away. Vice President Pence may have one of the most earnest voices and looks I've seen in a game recently, but he's still playing a game. And if he wants to be about law and order, then you call balls and strikes wherever you see them, not just based on color. And if this kid and the others who are around them,
video of Jacob Blake being shot in the back 7 times by a police officer in Kenosha, and the additional shooting of protesters. Despite the overwhelming plea for change, there has been no action. So our focus today cannot be on basketball.
When we take the court and represent Milwaukee and Wisconsin, we are expected to play at a high level, give maximum effort, and hold each other accountable. We hold ourselves to that standard, and in this moment, we are demanding the same from lawmakers and law enforcement. We are calling for justice for Jacob Blake and demand the officers be held accountable. For this to occur, it is imperative for the Wisconsin State Legislature to reconvene after months of inaction and take up meaningful measures to address issues of police accountability, brutality, and criminal justice reform. We encourage all citizens to educate themselves, take peaceful and responsible action, and remember to vote on November 3rd. On behalf of the Milwaukee Bucks.
Thank you.
Mark Spears from The Undefeated joins us now. And Mark, we heard some compelling conversation in the last few days from players. And it was talk, and that talk became action on Wednesday. When did you get the sense, Mark, that this could happen?
It started Monday afternoon after the Bucks' last win. After the game, you would think they'd be talking about closing out the series against the Magic, but George Hill was like, man, I'm tired of these crooked-ass cops. And that led to a very interesting press conference in which basketball wasn't talked about. It. So it was there where I was like, all right, I need to start keeping my eye on what's going on here. Tuesday night, the Celtics and the Raptors met quietly about whether they should play or not in their next game. And they decided that they likely would continue to play, but they wanted to meet again tonight. Well, that meeting got canceled, but you had Doc Rivers' emotional plea last night. And then this morning, you see the video of the vigilante. And I think that kind of made the boiling pot even hotter. In terms of this morning, you know, the Raptors and the Celtics were talking about sitting and meeting again, and perhaps that got to the Bucks. Like, look, this is something that happened in our state. You know, how can we let them be the ones that lead it, or how can we let the Lakers be the one that don't play? And so the Orlando Magic actually showed up to the arena despite having conversations with executives that they were going to play, thinking that they were going to play. And the Bucks did do some some shooting and working out, but about 20 minutes before game time, George Hill and company decided it was best not to play, and kind of shocked the Bucks and shocked the rest of the league as well, and certainly had some after effects with Sterling and George talking about not playing.
It was my understanding, Mark, that they were fully prepared to take a loss, and they'd forfeit the game, but that ultimately became a postponement. And I mean, in real time, I understand sitting a day, but if you sit on Wednesday and you play on Friday, I'm trying to figure out what would be accomplished. You know what I'm saying? I've been trying to figure out what the plan is and what the hope is if it was simply a short term. Obviously that you pivot, because if teams are willing to say they wouldn't play at all on Wednesday night, then that's an entirely different deal. But I'm wondering if you get a sense from the players you talk to about what sitting for perhaps a short period of time, what the ultimate hope of that would be.
Well, I think what they saw today is how much power they have. We've been talking about them for hours, Scott. They shook up the sports world. The WNBA followed. Major League Baseball followed. But to your point, like, where do they go from here? What will they accomplish from here? I wholly believe that what they're doing in here, talking to us every day, talking on Zooms every day for the media that's not here, the stories that are written around the world are having a greater impact than they even realize. The problem is, man, we're so insulated in here, I barely know what's going on. I live in the Bay Area. It's burning down right now. My mom lives in New Orleans, and there's a damn storm maybe coming her way, but I got to hear that from my friends. So I don't think these guys really know what they're really, the impact of the amazing that they're doing is doing to this world. But it's unfair for them to think that they could kill racism, that they could kill bigotry and injustice by hooping. That's too much for them to bear. But I do think that little by little they could change people's hearts, maybe get some police reform. And Doc Rivers told them tonight, like, get some tangible things that you could do. John Lucas, another veteran, told him tonight, get some things that you could do immediate, not things that are long term. So I think there's going to be a lot of thinking and brainstorming going on, but ultimately, I don't know if they really can have the answer in 24 hours.
No,
but they have to know that being here is a lot louder than being on the outside, where I really haven't heard much from anybody on the outside. I will say this, Scott. Jaylen Brown also asked them, okay, if you guys leave here, are you just going to leave and go chill and hang out with your families and lose that loneliness, or are you going to be in the trenches? Are you going to be in the streets? And so to me, if you leaving just to leave and be mad, that's a waste of time. If you're going to do what Jaylen Brown said, be in the streets, be active, but to leave just because, like, if you're going to be about it, and let's see if they leave, they got to be about it, because they're certainly going to lose a lot about it, to be honest with you.
And Mark, the final thought I have, and you allude to it well, about being in this bubble, and yes, the players are well compensated, everyone understands that, but there is, from my understanding of people that have been inside it, this feeling of disconnect, and you're separated from family, you're separated from people you care about, and I just wonder how much that feeling of isolation has magnified feelings of anger and frustration, and if that led to perhaps some of what we saw.
Well, I'll say this real quick. Next Monday, families that are quarantining, whose teams are still alive, they get to reunite with their families. So when you see a man get shot 7 times with his kids in the back seat, and you haven't seen your family in 2 months, perhaps that causes a lot of the emotions that you're having right now as well.
Mark, as always, it's been real heavy lately, but I always appreciate the conversation with you whenever they happen. Be well, and we'll talk again soon, okay?
All right, yeah, man. Pray for my mama and the people of Louisiana, man. Let's be okay. No more floods and hurricanes and stuff.
Texas, too. Our thoughts are with them. Appreciate you, Mark. Thank you.
All right.
As our show group met today, we wondered if maybe the Brewers would play their scheduled home game with Cincinnati, and the answer turned out to be no. They said they were inspired by the Bucks' move to stand down. Seattle and San Diego followed suit, as did San Francisco and Los Angeles later in the day.
some things I think are just bigger than sports, and I don't think it should require athletes needing to boycott playoff games to remind us Black Lives Matter and that police brutality is unacceptable and that systemic racism needs to be eliminated.
It wasn't a decision that we took lightly, and I think the Bucks spearheaded it for us. They started the discussion. They made it. It gave us a conversation to have, and it was eye-opening for us, and we felt like it was the right thing to do.
There were 12 games played. Number of players elected not to play. Dom Smith, the Mets, did play, knelt during the national anthem, and spoke emotionally post-game.
I think the most difficult part is to see, like, people still don't care. And for this to continuously happen, I mean, it just shows just the hate in people's heart. And, I mean, that just sucks, you know? And being a black man in America, it's not easy, so, I mean, like I said, you know, I wasn't there today, but I'll bounce back. I'll be fine.
Remarkable day in sports. It started with the Milwaukee Bucks deciding they wouldn't play. And when everything in the NBA stopped in mid-March because of the coronavirus, there was a feeling of total uncertainty about what would come next. In months, we got an answer. It was a bubble. In that bubble Wednesday, once again, the NBA stops, and once again, there's a feeling of total uncertainty about what comes next. Thursday morning's meeting of the Board of Governors feels significant, but is it? Because if the players in their meeting do decide that they're done, then there's not a whole lot for the Board of Governors to talk about. The emotions are understandable. It seems as if those superseded a plan, and now the NBA is left to figure it out on the fly, and it is amazing to process in real time. When we continue on SportsCenter, Washington football team owner Dan Snyder under fire again. Another bombshell report from the Washington Post. Adam Schefter joins us to talk about if it could impact the future ownership of the franchise. Plus, comeback fizzles in overtime as the
Usually thinking about a triangle.
good pressure.
Bump that bothers you isn't normal.
Great. Well, last month marked 20 years since your debut as Wolverine in X-Men.
Yeah.
And in fact, we found your original Wolverine audition from 1999. Let's take a look at this.
Oh.
I'm not like you. Listen, kid, about the only thing you've done to endear yourself to me is to get me into a fight. So listen to me. Shut up.
Dude.
A little more magician than more brain.
The joy of making a difference in someone's life.
Oh, that's a beautiful thing. Well, Jason, first of all, you have a great name. And you wrote a letter to the show to nominate your mom as a healthcare hero. Florence, either your son really loves you or he's trying to get out of doing some chores. But Jason, if you'll be so kind, can you read us a few lines from the letter?
Of course. My name is Jason Jurga. I'm a sophomore at St. John's High School in Shrewsbury. I consider myself, many who know me, to be an awesome kid.
I agree with that, by the way.
But forget about me. Let me introduce you to my most wonderful person in the world, my mother. My mom is an amazing nurse and a full-time caretaker for my father, who continues to gallantly fight Lou Gehrig disease, also known as ALS. Now, not only is she responsible for Dad's care, also for my two sisters and I. We have so many pressing responsibilities, but she never does fail to smile.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, people with ALS get a lot of support. I mean, it's caring for Dad.
The most powerful and uplifting moments of the night, the last fight. Explain.
Is
is really just about keeping us in line. So we who are on the other side of this are not watching this confused simply because this is well-produced propaganda with a shiny veneer. We know what order really means. We know what law and order is a dog whistle for. And if we would just actually get together and resource our communities in the ways that they deserve, grow strong communities from the ground up instead of over-police them from the top down, we wouldn't be having to have any of these conversations. The answer and the solution is really clear. The question is, are those who have the power actually going to do it?
Clint Watts, I said earlier in the broadcast, so many people just seem to think they look better with an AR. And of course, this convention has already featured a guy in the news because he brandished one in front of his house in a gated community in St. Louis. And now an unfortunate circumstance for the president. Kid accused of shooting up 2 people with his AR at the ripe old age of 17 is seen in the photo BuzzFeed released front row center at a, or front row side at a Trump rally.
That's right, Brian. A 17-year-old showing up in a protest with a AR-15 is not law and order. That's chaos and disorder. It is creating a dangerous situation. We are essentially seeing people moving out into the streets, and you're seeing an argument from some that people should mobilize for themselves for their own self-defense. This isn't self-defense. Driving across the state border, going to a town, assembling with a weapon, that is not law and order. That's actually chaos and disorder. It heightens the situation. You're essentially pushing people out. And so what the law enforcement did last night, they were pushing out a protest that had gotten out of control and starting to get violent. There was property damage. They were doing what they could, but they're understaffed, under-resourced, and it's now pushed into groups that are essentially taking it upon themselves to dish out whatever they deem to be law and order under auspices of which are unclear. And as long as we keep having these chaotic situations, we'll keep having these just tragedies like we had last night, where that video right there is absolute anarchy, and bringing weapons in with untrained people who have no authority to be there is only going to make the situation worse. And we'll see more Americans either wounded or killed in these situations, and it could get much, much more dangerous as the election approaches.
And to your point, and to be honest, we saw the Twin Cities quickly overwhelmed. We saw Kenosha quickly overwhelmed as well, where the local sheriff today said, no thanks, we're not looking for armed help in a vigilante form. Mike Murphy, Clint Watts, Brittany Peckneck-Cunningham, a pleasure to have the three of you on. Thank you all for staying up late with us. The latest on this hurricane position, hours to go before it makes landfall,
is going to, make its way in with the eye wall. All right, again, Steph, on the backside of these two very large casino resorts, some pretty strong winds back there. Give us an update.
Yeah, I am. I was just in a shelter. Sorry, Ken, Dory. I was just taking a quick break there, but I'm out here now. Here's the thing. We've had a gust to 61 miles an hour. My anemometer that I'm holding, I've been able to get a gust to 33. Obviously, this is unofficial, and, you have to go with the stronger gust. And you can see how it's kind of really, if you're not standing steady and sturdy, it can really blow you over. Now, Jim is protected by his hotel. I'm actually on the back side of my hotel. He's on the front side of the hotel, which is, probably a 10, 15-minute walk from here for now. But